Hello, I'm Josh, and during this time of isolating, quarantine, I thought it would be kind of fun to go through some of my films, my film collection, and just kind of talk about them and recommend them. Some of the films I'm choosing are a little less known, a little more obscure. But yeah, so first film I want to talk about is a film known as A Face in the Crowd. So, A Face in the Crowd is from 1957, and it's a film directed by Elia Kazan and written by Bud Schulberg. And you may remember those people. If you're into film history or just like classic films, you might know them as the people behind On the Waterfront. Now, this was a huge film back in the day. It still is pretty popular. It won 8 Oscars at the time, and it's still widely regarded as a classic. Now, what was not widely regarded as a classic when it came out, and is still relatively obscure, is this guy right here, A Face in the Crowd. Now, when this came out, it immediately got a bunch of mixed reviews on it, and not really a whole lot of people saw it. It was a pretty big box office bomb. And in the past years, since it has been released, it's gained a lot of popularity. Within the past couple months, we've had shout-outs about this film from Will Ferrell and Bryan Cranston, which I thought was very interesting. Was not expecting that, because this is still relatively obscure. As you can see on the cover, though, a face that is not obscure is that of Andy Griffith. You probably know him on the Andy Griffith Show and Matlock, two of the biggest TV shows pretty much ever in American television history. In fact, in doing this video, I realized my mouse pad is of the Andy Griffith Show, so you can see I'm a pretty big fan of his myself. This film, it's actually his first film before any of his TV shows. I think he'd basically done the No Time for Sergeant's play for a little bit before doing this, but this is his first movie, and it is very different from at least anything I've seen him in. It's pretty surprising watching him in this. I think what makes this film so important is just how much it talks about and ends up predicting. It goes into just media corruption, manipulation, fame, even into politics a little bit at the end, and just how much of what it touches on is true nowadays and is more prominent nowadays than it would have been back then. So going into the story a little bit, so Andy Griffith, he plays a drifter, storyteller, guitar player named Lonesome Rhodes. He is discovered by a radio journalist played by Patricia Neal. She finds him at an Arkansas jail. She immediately sees kind of the skill and charisma this guy has, and so she's basically, we need to get him on the air. And they do, and they give him his own show, and he quickly becomes more popular than anything they've ever had on their network. He ends up getting a job out in Tennessee for a local television station where he meets Walter Matthau, who's a TV writer. Since he is a little more rough around the edges than, say, your Andy Taylor, he quickly becomes corrupted by the power and just the fame, and it ends up catching up with him. Now, in addition to this film just being so important and relevant to today, I feel it is also a very easy one to get into, very watchable movie, and a large part of that has to do with just the performances in it. This film has very natural, realistic, modern performances, I would say, and a lot of that has to do with Elia Kazan, the director. Now, if you are familiar with his work, you know that he is considered one of the greatest, if not the greatest, directors pretty much of all time, and he does not disappoint in this one. The acting is incredible. Andy Griffith definitely has probably the most standout, the most showy acting in the film, and that largely comes from just how raw and how untrained Andy Griffith really was at the time, and Kazan really uses that and pulls it out of him. Andy Griffith has even said in interviews later that he felt that he was just not becoming a very nice person on the set. He said he felt like he was being Lonesome Rhodes a lot of times in real life. An interesting thing I read, apparently in between takes he would ask for old chairs that he could break to kind of build up his rage. But in addition to Andy Griffith, we also have Patricia Neal, who in a way almost carries the film. We often see Lonesome Rhodes through her perspective, and our feelings about him change as hers change, almost. I feel nowadays she's not as well known of an actor. Probably most known for, say, The Day the Earth Stood Still. That's likely what most people know her from. One of my favorites is The Breaking Point, which is based on an Ernest Hemingway story. She's very good, very different from this film, though. In addition to her, we also have Walter Matthau, as I said. Now, he, like Andy Griffith, very out-of-character performance for him, but he does very well in this, and his final speech in the film is one of my favorites. Lee Remick, if any of you are familiar with her, this is her first film. Nowadays, she's also kind of relatively obscure, maybe. Best known for The Omen and Anatomy of a Murder, I'd say, are probably the most people would know her from. But she's also very good in this. Now, in addition to just the performances being incredible, the cinematography is also quite amazing. It has a very film noir look to it. It's not super uncommon for films in the 50s and 40s of that era to have a very heavy shadow, low-key lighting, for dramas especially. But I think this film really utilizes that well, especially with the incredible production design. You can never really tell if you're on a set or if this is an actual location you're at, which I know for a lot of people is kind of a deal breaker when trying to get into older movies. That is quite good, as well as just the black and white. I know that's another thing a lot of people have a hard time getting into, is just black and white movies. But for this film, I can not see this film being in color. I think just from dramatic standpoint, as well as just considering it how much it talks about television since it's in the 50s, I think just from a thematic standpoint as well, black and white was definitely the right way to go, and this film looks just absolutely beautiful. But in addition to the cinematography, editing also plays a very, very important role in filmmaking. Now, if you're familiar with Martin Scorsese, I saw him talk about Elia Kazan, and how Kazan said that he wished he had studied more with editing earlier on, and this is because he saw the power and the importance of editing. I feel it is one of his best edited movies. It always knows the right place to use a shot, just the length, just the pacing is great. The film also has a few very memorable montages that I really love as well. Along with the editing, music is another very, very important aspect of film, and the music in here is great. A lot of the songs are done by Andy Griffith, and he performs them in his shows. The score for it is generally done with a very twangy guitar. This, at the time, was relatively uncommon. It was becoming a little more common in the 50s to have that kind of sound to it, but a lot of movies were still going for the orchestral scores, kind of like you would see in King Kong or Gone with the Wind, the the big epic scores. Even if it was just a dramatic movie, they would still have the swooping scores with them. One of Kazan's earlier films, A Streetcar Named Desire, was actually one of the early Hollywood films to move away from this method of scoring. The use of it in this film is very fitting, and also, once again, helps it feel very watchable, very modern to today's audiences. If you would like to watch this film, I believe it's available on just about every streaming site as a rent or buy option. I don't think you can stream it necessarily like from Netflix or Hulu. Physically, you can get it. See, I got this about 5 years ago. It's very hard to find. I found it at a used bookstore eventually. I looked this up on eBay, and someone was charging $75 for it. Apparently it's rare, out of print, but I don't know if I'd spend that much. Thankfully, since then, the Criterion Collection has put out their own version of it, which is much better picture quality. I think they have a 4K scan of it now, and all the bonus features from this copy, plus some of their own, and this package design is great. They made my version of On the Waterfront, so you can see they definitely care about the film. So yeah, I definitely recommend going that option if you want to buy it physically. So yeah, thank you for watching me as I kind of ramble about how much I love A Face in the Crowd and how much I think you need to watch it. So if you liked the video, you can like it. If you want to subscribe, see what other things I put out next, very welcome to do that as well. Comment below. I'll see you later.